Hey Grande Alive, this is your weekly Newsish Roundup brought to you by Grande Hospital and Direct Music Source. Some ticked-off parents are taking the high school to the field over sports. Several families are openly speaking out against the decision made by Grande High School administrators not to let their kids play sports for the high school teams. So here's the scoop. These kids are attending what's called the Baker Web Academy, a private online school over in Baker, and because of this, Grande High is not letting the kids play on the Tigers teams. But this isn't always how it's been, apparently. In the past, the school has allowed the kids to play, but not anymore. So why exactly was the change made? Is it legitimate? These are some of the questions that the parents have been asking.
Why should they, say, have the privilege to play sports there, and we're not contributing somehow to the school? I beg to differ with that opinion. I think we do contribute a lot, as I've said earlier, based upon taxes and fundraisers and volunteer time and you name it from our case. But I think bigger is your homeschoolers are allowed to play sports.
Sure.
And they're not contributing anything to the school. Mm-hmm. And we've been homeschoolers, so we've been on that side of the fence too. But now I'd have to say, gee, so over here, we can't, but they can. When they talk about, the superintendent talks about, well, you know, we can't track Baker Web Academy's academic process. Well, actually, they can very well, but you tell me that they're tracking homeschoolers. That's every family is individual to how they track things. I just feel like a lot of the answers that are given back and forth are just excuses, and it does lead back to money. And I just say, let's do what's best for the student and give people some options, and let's work together as a community.
So what do you think, Grande Alive? If a student attends another private school, not the public school of their town, should they be allowed to compete on the public school teams? Should the school allow the students to play despite not receiving government subsidies for their attendance? Should the school make an exception for these particular students? Your thoughts and your comments in the section below. Have you been feeling a little sick recently? Have a fever, a bad headache, stiff neck, a little confused and weak? Paralyzed? Well, if so, you should go to the doctor or get someone to drive you there if you're paralyzed. Recently, mosquitoes have been tested positive in the Ronde Valley with the West Nile virus, and these are some of the symptoms. If you're over 50, have diabetes or high blood pressure, or are just overall a person who gets sick a lot, you're at risk. Now, hold on, don't panic, leave your pitchforks inside, and I promise you, Jesus isn't on the horizon. I had a chat with Chris Law at the Union County Vector Control, and he said currently it's not a big concern. West Nile is transmitted primarily through birds, he said. Robins, magpies, jays, crows, ravens, the works. Wherever the birds go, the West Nile virus goes, he said. And he hasn't seen the West Nile in any animals around here yet, including the birds. When he starts seeing it in animals, he said, then we have a bigger problem. So what's the moral of the story? If you feel sick, go to the doctor. If you know you're going to be hiking by a stagnant pond, put on long-sleeve shirts and pants. Minimize standing water near your house, and just don't lick dead birds. They may look appetizing, but they're full of bacteria and disease, and it's just not a place your tongue should go. So, what's going on this next week? Well, a whole heck of a lot of live music. Tonight, Thursday, at 5 p.m., there's music at Max Square, and at 8 p.m. at 10 Depot Street in the Grande. Tomorrow, Friday, Barley Browns and Baker is having Jeremiah Craig at 8 p.m. And this weekend, as part of the Wallowa County Thunder Run, Ashes to Ashes and Blue Tattoo will play Friday night in Enterprise at the fairgrounds. And speaking of the Thunder Run, what happens when a bunch of bikers get together and coordinate an event? Well, lots of exhaust and noise, first of all, but also food, games, and, as I mentioned, live music, apparently. That's going on in Enterprise both Thursday and Friday. But the car junkies aren't letting up the bikers one-up them. Saturday, they're getting out their chrome polish and starting up the classic cars for the Baker City Memory Cruise. Also this weekend in the Grande, there's a drug-free run going on up at Mount Emily Recreation Area. There will be no drugs at this run, I promise, and the run is put on so that there won't be any drugs anywhere else at all. And after you're done getting all sweaty, raising awareness for drugs, you can head down to the memorial pool and swim around in the outdoor tub with your dogs. That starts at 11 o'clock a.m. Overall, a fun-packed weekend with a ton of crap to do, which means none of you should be inside at all this weekend, unless you're reading a classic or watching an Ingmar Bergman film. Then I forgive you. In sports, speaking of the LHS Tigers, the football team is kicking off their season this weekend with a jamboree. As part of this jamboree, they're going to play Enterprise and Imbler for about a quarter's length each of the games. It starts at 6 p.m. at Eastern Oregon University. Also, if you can't make it to the jamboree, and I mean really can't, not just I'm too lazy to get off my sofa and leave my big jug Pepsi, we're going to be live streaming the jamboree plus all the rest of the football games this whole season on the GrandeLive.tv. It's a pretty cool service. We have an instant replay, a caller, and a bunch of fancy schmancy stuff to make the games really cool and accessible. You can even bring it up on the real game to watch the replays if you're at the stadium. So bottom line, go to the game, tune into La Grande Live, support your Tigers, and don't lick dead birds. Up at EOU, the Mountie volleyball girls trashed Rocky Mountain this weekend for not one, not two, but 3 games in a row. The scores were 13-25, 11-25, and 15-25. Pretty big margins if you ask me. But then again, I know about as much about volleyball as I know about dead birds. Okay, I'll stop beating that dead bird. Anyway, the next EOU game will be at Big Sky Invitational on August 26th. They're playing Carroll at 12 p.m. And that's it. This Newsish Roundup was brought to you by Grand Ronde Hospital and Direct Music Source. Also, a big shout out to both Eastern Oregon University's sports website and The Observer for some information both in the sports segment and also in the What's Happened in La Grande segment this week. Tune in next week for more local content. I'm Will Bowman.